the first question I have, I mean, all about, having fun and not burning out. Let's say I'm a 10 to 16-year-old soccer player. I'm young. I really want to compete. How do I balance having fun and like making the game enjoyable, but not burning myself out so I still can compete at a very high level?
Yeah, I feel of that, a lot of the fun is taken out from the game, not
Yeah.
by the 10-year-old.
Okay.
It's by the environment around the 10-year-old,
Mm,
whether that is the coach or whether it's the parents. And it could be one or the other. It could be the coach, it could be the parents. I've seen
yeah.
it where it's both. You could have a really serious coach for a U10 team or a U11 team in this case, if it's a 10-year-old,
Hmm.
who they're super serious about it. They take the fun out of training sessions. They take the fun out of soccer. Just to be really general from that perspective.
Yeah.
But the other more unknown one, and I say unknown because you know the 10-year-old spends more time with the parents than they do with anybody.
Yeah.
And parents can be some of the bigger issues when it comes to taking the fun out of the game. On the car ride home, when they're at
Yeah.
home, after training, some parents tend to live vicariously through their child,
Yes.
and that kind of runs from the parent down to the child. And kids are kids; they're absorbing their environment that they're in. And when a parent's taking that perspective on their kids kind of development in football or in soccer, the kids feel that. They feel it.
Yeah.
That they get a sense of that from the parents, and it starts to become more of a burden. And my parents want me to play soccer more than it is I want to play soccer.
Yeah. Do you think though that has to do part with the parents kind of like ego wanting them to like, because I feel, and although most parents won't admit it, but there was a time when I asked my father, "Hey, what is it? Why is it that you really want to win?" And he almost blurted it out, I almost want to like show the other parents that I have a better soccer player, my son. Is it
Yeah,
like they also want to show off themselves and say, "Look at my son." We do it with parents do it with colleges as well. Like there'll be times when someone else will be like, "Oh, guess what? My student just entered this college and you didn't." And so it's almost like that competition. Do you think that's sometimes healthy? Like, where is that balance between being healthy? Okay, you can kind of like brag a little bit, but not so much where it's like, your son or your daughter is hearing this and maybe they don't want that for themselves.
yeah. I think there's a fine balance with that because
Mhm.
you're correct. There is an ego perspective and a
Yeah.
competitiveness. Um, but I also do believe the balance is truly knowing whether your child is
Mm,
somebody who can do well in the game or not.
yeah.
And that, because that comes from education. Because if a parent doesn't know that, then it's a case of they don't know what a good soccer player looks like, for example, and
Yeah.
what it takes. Then it's hard for them to really grasp on whether their kid can make it or not.
Yeah.
So they could have that super competitive side and want their child to do well, but they do. Sorry, I've got my dog next to me.
Yeah.
Do they truly know what it takes for that child to make it to the next level, so to speak, or to get a good college scholarship?
Yeah.
And some of them don't, but they're still competitive and still try and drive that component of their child's development when they don't truly know what it takes. And some do, and that's where I find the balances. I think there was a cool story about Christian Pulisic, and kind of the pressure his father put on him.
Yeah.
But his father kind of knew the game because his father's got a good background in the game, and he
Mhm.
saw something in his son to where
Mm.
he could apply that pressure. And maybe he had an ego, maybe he didn't. I don't know the whole story, but
Yeah.
he knew his son had something, and he could push his son to a level to where he could potentially make it. And look at him now.
Yeah.
So I think there's a
Exactly.
balance between those two things of truly knowing whether your child has something
Yeah.
to where they can make it in that sport or not, and trying to balance those two things.
Yeah, because I feel like it's kind of tough because like I feel like you do need someone to see something in you. Like maybe a coach may see something in you that that player doesn't, and it may be hard for that player to know. Oh my God, I have some potential here. I can actually take it to maybe the semi-pro, the professional. I could go at the USL, the MLS, and maybe not the Premier League. But how I guess can a player? I mean, since you played as well, how can a player, I guess, discover that they have something in them when they don't have such like parents or coaches with such great soccer background that have actually played at the highest level? It's kind of tough.
Yeah. Yeah. But for me, it becomes down to kind of a psychological, scientific
Okay.
factor of, um, you've got your understanding of something internally,
Yeah.
and then you've got the external factors, which are the people around you, the environment around you. Now, if I'm a kid who plays soccer, and just to use a loose term, if I can't
Yeah.
walk and chew gum at the same time,
Yeah.
and somebody sees me as that I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, but I
Yeah.
play soccer and I think I'm amazing,
Mm,
then it's got to be some sort of external factor that makes me
yeah.
aware of that. So I think it's important to have that support system around you,
Mhm.
to be honest with you, because if you're playing a sport that you are good at or you're not, you need to know. You need feedback, right? We all need feedback. We need to get better. We want to improve, and whether you're not good at something, that feedback still helps you, because
It
you
does.
start to learn what you're not good at, what you are good at, what you need to improve at, and you work at those things.
Yeah.
So I think internally, I have my own perspective on whether I'm good at something or not, but it's the external sources around us that make us aware of those things. And ultimately, they're the biggest factor in this, because without seeing things through somebody else's eyes and not just your own, it's you could get tunnel vision, and you could really get a false sense of reality of what you truly are without that feedback. So I think having that good support system around you, who is honest with you
Yeah.
on both sides, good and bad, who is honest with you, because honesty is so key in this sport. If you've got that around you, then I believe, regardless of whatever your strengths and weaknesses are, you need to know.
Okay, very interesting point. And so now moving on to like the feedback in into self-confidence. I mean, from your point of view, from your playing and coaching, what does true like self-confidence in a player look like inside the game and outside the game in terms of like conducting himself, behavior, conversations, being able to open up with parents and coaches and players?
Yeah, it all comes down to the relationship, in my opinion.
Relationship. Okay.
It all comes down to the relationship and the environment that player's in. That player's got to feel safe. They've got to feel like they're in a trusted environment. They've got to feel like they've got a sense of freedom to express themselves.
Okay.
And, I think if you've got a couple of those components involved, then you're gonna give that player the autonomy to be themselves. And when you feel like you've got the freedom to be yourself, you feel that sense of confidence of, I've got this great support system around me. I've got this coach or parent or wherever it may be, or teammate that trusts me, and I feel the trust in our strong relationship. That gives me a sense of empowerment to go and be what I want to be.
Yeah.
So I think those things are really, really important, and it can vary in the environment that you're in. But I think on a foundational level, the relationship that you've got with whoever it is, a coach, a teammate, player, parent, whatever that may be, the foundation of that is the relationship, and feeling, empowered, trust in that relationship, and safe.
Well, yeah, and then that surrounding is super important. I think it's like not touched about is because I there's been times when coaches have like they almost like put labels on players like, oh, this player is so shy. Yet put him in a different environment, the guy is probably the most confident player on the field and outside. But when he's
Yeah,
with another team, he's like, why is he so shy? And maybe
yeah,
his friends, he's like, what? He's a totally different player. And so that surrounding definitely has a big part to do. I've seen it with my life and in other people's lives as well. But I mean, how important then is sticking to your personal commitments? Do you think personal commitments leads to confidence and self-esteem in yourself as a player?
personal commitments in terms of,
In terms, let's say I commit to myself, okay, today I'm going to give it 110% in this training. I'm going to focus on communicating with my players. I'm going to be honest with the player. If I see he didn't do something correctly, I'm not just going to tell him, hey, you're wrong, but have a conversation. That type
yeah,
of commitment.
yeah, for sure. I
Okay.
think there's a couple of different components to this, and this is all part of being a coach and also a parent, and just
Yeah.
a mentor in any
Mhm.
business, whatever it may be, is how can you not just guide yourself and improve yourself and educate yourself from a leadership perspective or a management perspective,
Yeah.
but how do you guide people? How do you empower people? How do you
Mhm.
help people be a better version of themselves? And part of my job as a coach is, if I'm not making myself better, then the players are not going to get better.
Oh,
If I stay stagnant and I don't improve my knowledge and my experience, the same thing's going to happen to my players.
yeah.
So from that perspective, I have a duty, whether I'm coaching at the pro level, college, youth, whatever it may be, I have a duty to the game, to the players, to my organization, to this country, and
Yeah.
wherever I am, I have a duty to all of those things to be better so I can improve the environment I'm in.
Yeah.
And then the next level to this is, what am I doing to help the individual?
Mhm.
So now we can start to talk about things such as, setting goals.
Yeah.
How do I help that individual be better and improve by maybe setting goals, saying SMART goals for an example, and setting up individual development plans to where those people have got goals themselves that they want to achieve.
Yeah.
How do I help you achieve your goal?
Mhm.
And then we work through that process. So I look at this kind of at me first, because I'm the one who has to be better and make my players better.
Yeah.
And again, this can go to any industry. And then the other piece
Yeah.
is the individual. How can I help that individual achieve what they want to achieve?
Super powerful right there. Okay, so now this is more of a personal question for you. It's the same question, but have you ever been in a situation where you like deviated from your personal commitments, and did it affect your coaching style and maybe your game in soccer? Let's say you said, okay, today I'm going to go to the gym, work out at 7 a.m., but you were 30 minutes late, and then you had a training session. Did that affect you, or did you not see the difference there?
I would say for me, kind of a personal
Yeah.
connection with that was, I'll give you a quick synopsis of my backstory. My
Okay.
ambition was always to be a pro.
Okay.
And I'm from Liverpool, England, and I lived there up until I was 20 years of age.
Okay.
And I wanted to be a pro. That was everything to me.
Okay.
And it didn't work out for me in England. So
Mhm.
I got the opportunity to come to the US in 2008 and to go to school. I got a scholarship. I was very fortunate, but
Yeah.
that was part of my vision and my pathway and my goal and my
Mhm.
dream to become a pro in the USA, because it didn't work out in England.
Yeah.
And I played, I'm 32 now, but I played up until, what was it, 2 years? Yeah, 2 years ago. I mean, maybe 3 years ago. So I played up until like 2 or 3 years ago in a league called the PDL, which is now the USL2.
Mhm.
And even 2 or 3 years ago, I was still chasing kind of that dream to make it to the next
Wow.
level. It didn't work out as a player. That's a whole different story. But
Mhm.
there was a moment in my career where I realized that it wasn't going to happen. No
Mm.
matter how hard I tried, it wasn't going to happen. And that was about, I'd say, 4 years ago, when I was playing for a team called Des Moines Menace in 2016. It was. Um, I don't know what it was, but there was something at that time that kind of made me realize this is not going to happen.
Wow.
I'm not going to make the step. And it wasn't as though it depends how you phrase this, but it wasn't as though I'd
Yeah.
lost faith in it
Wow.
happening. I always had the faith,
Yeah.
but from that moment, that goal naturally transitioned from making it as a pro player to making it as a pro coach.
Wow.
So the goal transitioned now to be a coach. So naturally, through that process, I paid less attention to some components of my, to my game overall as a player. Maybe I was training less on my own. Maybe I was going to gym less.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But I'd say from that period where that goal came to a realization, it probably wasn't going to happen. It naturally transitioned over. Now, can I make it to the next level as a
Mm.
coach? And that
Wow.
directly had an impact on kind of my life as a player and what I did. So, um, yeah, that was kind of my moment where it naturally just changed everything about my life as a player.
And that's super important. I appreciate you sharing that story, because a lot of players ask themselves, am I too old to become a pro now? Right? The common question. I think every player has had that, where am I too young? Am I too do I have the enough support, whatever it is. And you shared, for you at least, and I want to make sure they get it right. I don't want to, mislead people. So when you got your moment was inside of you click, it was almost like internal when you lost faith in yourself, but you immediately transitioned. Okay, I lost faith in myself as a player, but now I have a different goal, a different ambition to be a pro coach.
I wouldn't say I lost faith in myself. I
Okay.
lost faith in the ability for an international player
Okay.
who had not got professional experience before
Okay.
in breaking into the system.
Okay.
It it makes it very difficult. And now I'm at that level. I
Yeah.
understand a little bit more why,
Okay.
but I am also now, because I'm in that level now, I can also look back from the other side of,
Yeah.
well, I did have opportunities. There were coaches who wanted to sign me,
Yeah.
but didn't. And for
Mm,
whatever reason, they didn't sign me. That could have been just because I wasn't good enough. I don't know.
yeah.
Or, there was other factors to it. But it wasn't that I lost faith in myself, because I even still to this day, believe it or not, I mean, I still train with the team now, and I can still go into training and hold my own. And still to this day, I still think I could probably play at this level, right?
That's
But
good.
that's just me being biased. But
Yeah.
um, but I never lost faith in myself. I still believe today I could probably play there, but it was kind of I started to understand the system a little bit more, and I
Yeah.
started to realize that this is becoming really difficult. The chances of me making it are going to be very slim,
Yeah.
and then it naturally transitioned over to, okay, my next step or my next barrier for me to get over it is, can I break in as a coach now and
Yeah.
start to develop myself as a coach at that level? And that's kind of how it worked.
Wow. Okay. So now moving on to winning, since you're surrounded with, you have to win in order to obviously win titles and keep improving as a team and for your players. What do you believe are the two core principles of developing a winning mentality? Like if you think of competition, I mean, when I ask coaches this question, they think of, you know, Messi, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, that winning obsession mentality. For you, what does that look like, having that winning mentality?
It's a culture.
Culture?
Yeah. And this is really a lesson that I learned over the past, I would say, 2 years. You kind of heard the cliche word thrown around a lot: culture, culture, culture.
Yeah.
And you study it and you learn about it, but you don't really get a true sense of it and how important it is until you're in a moment where you
Mhm.
learn why it's important.
Wow.
Until you can feel it, it's tangible, right?
Yeah.
You can read all the books you want, but unless you're in an environment where you truly feel why a culture matters, and you see how having a good culture works on the pitch,
Yeah.
or in a business, or in a school, or whatever it may be, in a basketball team,
Yeah.
unless you feel it and you see why it's important, I don't think you truly understand it. And I'm 32,
Okay.
and I've only just started to truly realize and understand
Yeah.
why culture is so important.
Yeah.
And that's why right now it's number one on my list, because I've
Wow.
seen it, and I've seen it work both ways. So culture for me is extremely important, and it's a broad topic, so I won't go
Yeah.
too deep into it, but it's so important. Having a good culture and a good locker room is key.
Okay. Interesting. So, I mean, let's go a little bit deeper into that. What is a great culture for you?
I would say, in a synopsis, is a culture or a group of people, a team of people in a club, in an organization, whether that's front office, whether it's a professional team, whether it's coaches, players, all having a good relationship or
Mm,
good relationships within that
okay.
core group, and all working towards a common goal. And that's the simplest format I can put it in, because, like I say, it's a very broad topic. But I think
Yeah.
that the relationships from the whole organization and all moving in the same direction, I think those two things are super important.
Okay. So now I guess part B of this question is more of situational, looking back and experience. Have you ever teamed or coached a player that you clearly saw he was just more, I guess, more mentally resilient, tougher, stronger, you can name it, than other players? If so, can you describe that experience and how that player elevated the team or players?
every team. And there's multiple examples I could choose.
Are you there?
I would say one a couple of years back when I had you got me?
Yeah, you're back. I lost you for a second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, the example I would give is probably a few years back when I had a U14 boys team,
Okay.
and they were really early in their development. We had, when you're talking about a U14 team,
Yeah.
from a physical perspective, you've got kids who are 6 feet and another
Yeah,
kid who's 4 foot,
yeah.
right? So you've got a really broad spectrum of physical components there, but also cognitive mental components.
Mhm.
Some guys are really mature and some
Yeah.
have not matured yet, just because they're at that stage in their development. But ironically enough, it was always the smaller guys on the team who had not quite, developed yet from all components, physical, mental, etc. They always seemed to be the most resilient players, because
Wow.
they had to be. They had to be, because they were playing against these kids, most of these kids who were much taller, stronger, faster, all the physical components you want to name. They're just better than them in many of those
Mhm.
components. So they had to be resilient no matter what, to be able to combat that, because they couldn't
Exactly.
compete physically. So what other way could they compete?
Yeah.
It was up here,
Yeah.
So I think that component, with those kind of smaller guys, just to use a loose term again, that helped the team collectively, and it also helped me as well, because
Yeah.
just to see that, it's empowering,
Yeah.
to see that it's empowering. And as a coach, you can kind of use that message, not just for that individual, but to empower the team too, as part of your culture type of thing.
And not to sound like offend any players, but when I was playing, like I would see players who were clearly physically stronger, faster, you name it. And then I would as I would sort of get into this routine, oh, this player doesn't look very good. But as soon as that player went in, all mental, like, oh my God, destruction. He would get in, he would grab me, nudge me, call me
Yeah.
names, and he'd get you off your name. He'd pull your shorts. There was this time when this guy pulled my shorts and my underwear was off. It was awful, dude. It's seriously.
Yeah.
Everybody was laughing to stand, and after that I was gone. I was like, wow. And
Yeah. Yeah.
not and from the height stand, he was very short. Like he couldn't compete, he couldn't outrun me. So he did things that other players didn't do. And so
Yeah.
that's the a good example that I was talking about. But
There's such a broad spectrum on that
yeah,
component too, because you've got some guys who are like way over the top, and you've got kids on the opposite end of the spectrum who have zero self-belief for themselves.
mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter the age, the height, the size, the
Yep,
physicality. They could be a really good player, but they just
yeah,
don't have the confidence. So you've
yeah,
got that broad spectrum for sure.
yeah. Okay, so now moving on to communication and vulnerability. We touched on this, but it is a topic that isn't really, put enough emphasis. Have you ever had a parent come up to you and truly express their true authentic feelings toward maybe a struggle that were going on with their players? Because a lot of the parents seem to live in the struggle, taking their kids to practice, getting up early, 7 a.m. to take them to, it could be even a recreational league. They got to go to work, provide food for their tables, they got to pay the bills. Have you ever had a parent who went up to you and just said, hey, Leigh, man, I'm going through this such and such situation? And it truly, like, you felt it be from a place, from the bottom of their heart?
Absolutely. I've had quite a few of those scenarios actually. So like we mentioned before, it's the parents want it so bad that they
Yeah.
put their life and everything into soccer for their kid, because sometimes they want it more than the kid. But
Yeah. Yep.
there is a process that I like to use when I was coaching youth soccer, to where it was an individual development process, and it always involved the parent,
Mhm.
because the kid spends more time at home with the parents than he did
Yeah.
with me. So it was important for me to get a better understanding of that kid from their parents,
Mhm.
so I could truly learn on a deeper level how that kid thinks, what they want, what they really do at home. Are they really kicking the ball around in the back garden like they tell me they are, or are they on the couch playing on the PlayStation? You get that information from parents, right? So you tend, it was always a good resource for me to bring parents in on these meetings, because you find out all of those things. But the other thing that you find out is you learn more about the parent. And
Wow.
you learn about, you know, is this parent kind of one of those pushy parents? And you learn how to manage that parent, which then you learn how to manage the player. Because if you've got a super pushy parent and the player doesn't kind of like that, and they need more fun in their life,
Yeah.
then I need to know that, so I can give that player more fun in their life and just make, you know, balance those two things. But on the other end too, you know, you could have a parent who just doesn't care about, you know, getting involved, and their kid is super enthusiastic and
Yeah.
they want to learn, they're having fun. And it's also balancing those two things too. So a story I could share probably on this part is
Yeah.
a parent and their son. The parent was having a really hard time with their son in school. He was not doing homework. He was just really pushing off school. And they shared that with me and asked me for some assistance. And one of their ways of navigating this was making me aware of it. But they also wanted to start to challenge that child who always put soccer first by taking soccer away from them,
Wow.
and balancing taking the soccer piece away with soccer is a luxury. This is a sport I'm paying for you. This costs a lot of money. Yes, it's fun for you. Yes, you love it. Yes, you see it as number one priority in your life, even above me as a parent sometimes.
Yeah.
But this is a luxury, and school is super important. Your education is super important. So, you know, parents would deal with this in different ways, but that parent decided to, you know, take soccer away from that child because it's a luxury, and make them focus more on school. And I said, you're the parent. I will support whatever your decision is. You just let me know what your decision is, and we'll work together on this. So, you know, the short story is that the kid ended up getting better in school. And he ended up going on to, because this is when he was in middle school at the time, and he ended up going on to high school and doing fairly well in high school. So, and he's actually a very good player also. So that was just a quick story of,
Yeah.
you know, kind of how school and
Yeah.
soccer and a parent needed some help in that department.
All right, so now this question, and feel free to answer it because there's going to be a lot of debates going on here. What are some of the things that parents tell you about their players, maybe complaints, challenges, that players say something else about their parents? Like there's just like, which side am I on here? Do I support the player or the parent here? I mean, anything that can just come up on top of your mind. And if not, well, then we'll just skip it.
Um, a common one is sort of another thing that we've spoken about is parents who are not educated in the game and don't really know what it takes. They can have sometimes a disillusion of where their kid can go in the future.
Yeah.
And that disillusion is largely because of, you know, the system around the kid. You know, at the end of the day, it's up to the club and the coach to be clear with the parents
Yeah.
on where that kid can go. So, you know, that's part of the structure of the environment the kid's in. It's kind of, I've been in environments where that's happened too, where, you know, parents think their kid's going to go and play D1, but the kid is probably you know, they may not even be able to play college soccer, for example. So I would say that, you know, parents sometimes give a false sense of security to some of their kids on that they can play, you know, for example, at Division 1, when in reality, at that moment in time, when they're 12, 13, 14, they truly don't know if they can play Division 1 soccer because it's too early, or, you know, the kid is just, you know, they're not quite there. So, you know, that's probably one of the most common ones that we see in youth sports.
Would you also think that it's kind of like understanding at that age, like parents put a lot of pressure, yet a lot of players don't really know who they are yet. Like they haven't
Yeah.
got their emotions like there's been situations where and again, I'm not a parent, but I've seen it where there's been and I can't go into like some I can't remember it, but there's been situations where parents are like, I don't know why my player reacted like this. And maybe it's the first time that that situation has happened for that player. So it was just natural reaction for them. Right. And
Yeah.
that they haven't like opened, maybe they haven't felt the emotion of jealousy, complacency, winning, success, whatever it is. And they're like, who am I? Right. And so that's why I think it causes sometimes some friction. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the developments, the natural development of females versus males, women or girls tend to develop sooner than guys do.
Wow.
So, you know, at that age group I was talking about, like the 13, 14-year-old age,
Mhm.
for boys is when they start to really get their growth spurts, for example. But what people don't really understand, from a psychological perspective and just the brain, is that
Yeah.
they're not just going through those physical, you know,
Yeah,
changes in
exactly.
height and etc. The brain is changing so much at that stage in their life. You know, they're starting to really comprehend society and what
Mhm.
fitting into a specific, you know, friend group looks
Yeah.
like, or into a social circle, and do you fit into that social circle? So, you know, at that age, I mean, even if you look back to you at that age and me at that age, I look back now and all I cared about was having the same cool clothes as my friends. And if I
Yep,
didn't have the same shoes, I didn't fit in, so I wouldn't be liked. And
exactly.
the people didn't like me. And if my hair wasn't cool and
Yeah.
all of this stuff, right? And that's really at that age is they're just starting to really form that sense of those friendship circles, and they don't want to lose it because we are social beings. We thrive on being social,
Exactly.
and we need that, and that goes back to our ancestors. That's just biologically how and who we are. So
Yeah.
when it comes to those components, as you said yourself, those kids really don't know who they are at that age.
Yeah.
And that is our job as coaches, as leaders, as mentors, as parents, or whoever that person is. That is our job to truly understand our players.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's where, like I mentioned before, I'd like to meet with the parents, because at those age groups I was working at that time, the parents knew that player way more than I did.
Yep.
So it was better to me for me to learn from the parent in addition to the player, and balance both of those and come to my own conclusions on how I could best help that person.
Yeah.
But like you said, they're really finding their own place in society. They have no idea where they fit in society right
Yeah.
now. They're figuring it out. And that rolls over into soccer
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah. Powerful stuff right there going into the psychological part. But okay, so now moving on here. I mean, flipping the script now, you talked about parents expressing their situations. Have you ever had a player that went up to you and was maybe having a struggle that you can tell they really don't share with anyone, but for some reason they trusted you and they went with you? And if so, how did that elevate your relationship as a coach player, and how do you think that helped them with player parent?
Yeah. It's funny because, you know, sometimes you don't know why players trust you. And that's just how
Yeah.
I've found that sometimes where you players open up to you sometimes, and it's a little bit sporadic, but they open up to you, they pour their heart out to you, and you walk away when you reflect, and sometimes you think, well, why did they do that? Like,
Mm,
why did they trust me so much? Um, and that happens sometimes, but sometimes you've really got to earn it too. You've got to really break somebody's shell. There's been a
wow.
lot of kids who are super closed, and you've got to find a way to open them up, and you've got to really dig into the background and understand where they come from, what their life at home is like, and you know, find out what their struggles are in life, and you've got to find, you know, kind of some sensitive spots for you to push,
Yeah.
for you to kind of break into that shell to eventually get into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's been, you know, both ends of that spectrum along my pathway as a coach, to where you're asking yourself, why did that person just open up to
Yeah.
me? And then you're really having to fight to get into somebody's mind and figure out, you know,
Yeah.
kind of why they are the way they are.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. Okay. So now, I mean, moving on, two final questions before we move on to the fun stuff, the exciting stuff you could say, is from your point of view, what are some of the toughest challenges? And I asked this question to John as well. That the challenges that aren't shown on social media, because social media is just like a real world. They're just showing their best stuff, the best selfies, the their best trainings, goals, whatever. But what are the challenges that aren't being shown on social media for parents and players?
For parents and players?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question because you see, even just in this transfer window,
Yep.
you see a lot of American players who are now starting to get opportunities over in Europe, which
Yep.
arguably Europe, being biased, is probably up there with the best leagues in the world.
Hmm.
Um, so it's great to see American players going over there, but people don't really know what that takes. They don't really
Wow.
know what development, you know, they don't really see what development looks like and what it is. They're not really able to get a tangible feel for what it truly is. Um, I think it's important that you're involved in a system that has a philosophy, an idea, an identity of
Yep.
who and what they want to be, and you've got the right coaches and environments around those people. But how do you get that message across? How do you get that out there to people, so they can see what that looks like? So it's I think it's really understanding and knowing what the developmental process looks like. It's tough. It is extremely difficult to make it. But when you see, Christian Pulisic's face, or Daryl DK, from Oklahoma City,
Yep.
who's just got an opportunity with Barnsley in Europe, for a guy to come from Oklahoma City to go to England and just be signed over there, people see that and they're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I could do that. But
Hmm.
they truly don't know what it takes. And I'm sure they could do it if they really wanted to,
Yeah.
but I don't think social media portrays what it really takes. It portrays the really nice, glamorous lifestyle of professional footballers, and
Yeah.
not the dirty work that goes into it. From the
Yeah.
parents' perspective, it's also dirty work for them, because some of the schedules of parents I have seen in a youth game, it's phenomenal. It really is. Because you forget these parents have got more than one kid. They've got jobs, they've got pets, they've got a life themselves too that they're trying to live. So there was a
Yeah.
day where a parent pulled their phone out to me, and she showed me a schedule, and it was from like 4 a.m. to like 9 p.m.
Jeez.
every single day. It was just full, because one kid had swim practice, another kid had baseball, this kid had soccer, and she was on her own as a single parent, and she had to work. So she's like
Wow.
driving here, driving there. So that's the other piece too, is the parents have really they've got to put the dirty work in too to help their child, because for their child to get better, they've got to be in the right environment. But for them to be in
Yeah.
the right environment, the parents got to take them there, right? So there's that, and then also just the education of parents, I think, is super important too, of what that process looks like, because it's difficult. You've got to understand what it takes to make it to the next level. Sometimes it takes a stern talking to. Sometimes it takes leaving your child alone because they're already mentally beat up. Sometimes it takes educating yourself on why you shouldn't scream at referees. I need to take that course too. But
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of dirty work that goes into it, and I say dirty work. You've got to really grind,
Yeah.
in multiple departments, for you to truly make it to the next level. And I don't think social media does a good enough job of
Yeah.
portraying what that looks like. It's a lot of glamour.
Yeah, and then you just went back to a question I had. You went deeper into a question that I had asked, is that's when parents are living in the struggle, like you said, 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. You could say that's all grind, struggle, trying to get this kid to baseball, to swimming, tennis, soccer. That's all struggle. And then paying the bills and working. That's something that social media doesn't show. They only show the trophies. Hey, we won 3-1 today. Oh my God, I met this coach today and we had an opportunity to take a picture, you name it. But
Yeah.
beforehand, the work to get to those moments is not shown. And I think
Yeah.
that's the powerful stuff. Okay, final question here before we move on. 3 pieces of advice, of actionable advice that you can give parents to encourage their young players going into 2021.
3 pieces of advice for parents to young players going into 21.
Yep.
The first one is education.
Education.
I do believe there needs to be more education out there for parents, on a broad perspective, from education on referees, education on education on the game itself, and just education on, you know, from a, I guess, support system perspective. And that'll put me onto my next point is the fun piece. You know, going back to the first question, is it's so important that you enjoy what you do. It's so important. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you don't enjoy it, it's not going to be fun. So I really believe that the fun component always has to be there for every player. Of course, every player will have a down day, and it won't feel fun some days.
Exactly.
But as long as it feels fun for the most part, that's really important. And the parent has to understand that. When a kid gets in the car after training, should the first question be, how many goals did you score? How many minutes did you play? Did you play well? That puts pressure on the kid. So maybe it's just a case of, did you have fun today? Yeah, excellent. And just leave it at that, right? And then if the kid wants to talk to you about it, the kid will.
Yeah.
If they want advice, they'll ask you, they'll talk to you. And then the third piece, be quiet on the sideline.
That's a good one.
I think that's super important, because it's I'll give you a very brief example of why that is, and I'll give you an example on how to combat that. And this was kind of a test I did, and it was quite nice. So my message to my players is my message that I would like to put across to them, and they're trying to execute something on the field.
Yeah.
And then a parent shouts something completely the opposite. And now what does that do to the kid? It confuses them. So now the message for that kid is confused, and now it really hinders them in the game. So it sends a confusing message. A way to combat that, and this is kind of a little trial I did, was before the game, I would invite parents over to the bench. And what I would do is I would give my pre-game talk. I would have my whiteboard with some notes on it and some magnets, and I would have the kids sit in front of the whiteboard, and I would have the parents behind the kids, so the kids were not distracted by the parents. And I would talk about the game plan, or what we were trying to do in that game, what we were trying to work on in that game.
Yeah.
And the parents would stand behind, and they would watch, and they would listen. And then that way, when the parents go to the sideline, they start to give the same message as I'm giving, just from the opposite side. And what I found eventually was two things. The parents stopped coming over before the game because they just decided to just be quiet on the sideline, or they were given the same message as me. So now the message is not confusing, and players can now really start to focus on whatever that piece we were working on for that game. For example, if we were trying to, be compact, a parent is given that same message, and it just helps the development process of the kids. So that's why I feel like parents just trust the coach, and just either be given the same message, or just let the kids play. Just let them be free.
Yeah. Great advice there, and interesting for what you did first as a coach, and then parents grasping onto that idea. So okay, moving on here to